Gentlelady from Georgia will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment number 105, printed in Part B of House Report 118-272. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Wyoming seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 105, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-272, offered by Ms. Hageman of Wyoming.
Pursuant to House Resolution 864, the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hageman, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I rise today in support of my amendment number 105, which prohibits the Department of Labor from providing so-called climate literacy training. In September 2022, the Department of Labor released a, quote, climate adaptation plan. This plan identifies the department as the agency that developed the climate training and discloses that it is exploring collaboration with other agencies for the purpose of promoting climate literacy training. Madam Chair, this climate literacy training is yet another example of the extent to which radical climate hysteria has permeated every agency and sub-agency within the Biden administration. The Department of Labor's mission statement actually says that it is responsible to foster, promote, and develop the welfare of the wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the United States, improve working conditions, advance opportunities for profitable employment, and assure work-related benefits and rights. Perhaps it would be a surprise to the Department of Labor, but creating a, quote, climate adaptation plan is not listed as either part of the agency's mission or priorities. Yet here we are. It is time for the Biden administration to stop catering to a politically radical agenda and actually focus on governing. It is time for the Department of Labor to focus on its mission of fostering, promoting, and developing the welfare of the wage earners, job seekers, and retirees. The purpose of my amendment is to ensure that the Department of Labor does just that it focuses on its true mission and leaves the politics of global warming out of it. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to send a message to the DOL that we will no longer tolerate its foray into this nonsense. And with that, I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I claim the time in opposition.
The gentlewoman is now recognized.
I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. This amendment blocks a critical aspect of the Biden administration's whole-of-government strategy to build resilience at home and abroad against the impacts of climate change. And with that, Madam Chair, I oppose the amendment and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields.
Since President Biden took office, the American worker has suffered a 3.1% pay cut, caused in large part by this administration's obsession with all things climate change and its war on affordable energy. The dramatic increases in energy costs have translated into higher costs for everything else, including food, housing, clothing, entertainment, and travel. This administration's war on affordable domestic energy has thus dramatically and negatively affected the very people that the DOL was created to serve, the American worker. In short, American energy independence is good for the American worker, but the converse is also true. Dependence on foreign-produced energy is bad for the American worker. Yet that is the very outcome of these wrong-headed programs such as the DOL's climate literacy training. Such training won't improve the lot of the American worker, it will hurt it. Last year, U.S. inflation-adjusted household income fell by the most in over a decade. This reduction in income is the direct result of the inflationary pressures caused by the Biden administration's energy and climate policies. These policies have also impacted our labor force participation rate, which remains low and has never fully recovered since the pandemic. There are serious labor issues to address in this country, and while I would argue workforce development and job creation are not a role of the federal government at all, so long as the Department of Labor exists, it should be focused on how it will work with American industries to foster a strong labor market. And with that, I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and with that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The question is in the amendment offered by a gentlewoman from Wyoming. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 106, printed in Part B of House Report 118-272. For what purpose does gentlewoman from Wyoming seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 106, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-272, offered by Ms. Hageman of Wyoming.
Pursuant to House Resolution 864, the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hageman, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of my Amendment 106, which prevents the Department of Labor from carrying out the environmental justice grant activities described in its 2022 Climate Adaptation Plan. Similar to my previous amendment on climate literacy training, this is climate change political capture inside the agencies of the federal government. Since taking office, President Biden has issued several executive orders directing federal agencies to address climate change and environmental justice, whatever that means. The DOL has been very busy in implementing that directive, and in the process, it has deflected resources away from its mission and wasted taxpayer dollars on trying to implement the Green New Deal. With its climate adaptation plan and environmental justice grant activities just being part of those efforts. The fact is that we don't need any such plan, and the justice that the DOL is peddling isn't justice at all. It is government-imposed wretchedness dressed up with nonsensical language, the very purpose of which is to pursue an agenda that has never been approved by this body. I encourage my colleagues to vote for my amendment, and with that I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose? Does any member claim time in opposition?
Sorry.
For
yes,
what
Madam
purpose
Chair,
does
I
the
claim the
gentlewoman
time in
from Connecticut
opposition.
seek recognition?
Yes, I claim time in opposition. Thank you. I
Gentlewoman
rise in
is
strong
recognized.
opposition to this amendment. This amendment blocks another critical aspect of the Biden administration's whole of government strategy to build resilience, both at home and abroad, against the impacts of climate change. And it's my understanding that this amendment would prohibit, let me give it an example. The agency highlighted certain grants provided under the Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities and Clean Energy Sector apprenticeships provided through the bipartisan Youth Build program, but that would be blocked. It's wrong to block the Department of Labor from common sense grant making intended to build skills in the clean energy sector for rural workers and for at-risk youth. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields.
While the workforce...
The gentleman from Wyoming seek recognition?
Yes, thank you. While the Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities does fund rural grant opportunities, this amendment would simply prevent the Department of Labor from infusing environmental justice priorities into the program and return its focus to building economic opportunity for rural Americans. In other words, it uses the money the way that it should. My amendment would block using money for things that it should not be using it for. While the Youth Build program does on face value sound like a beneficial program for development of vocational skills, the 2022 Climate Plan outlines how skills can be developed for demand in industries, including the clean energy sector. The reality is that it is a misapplication of funds and it is being used inappropriately. When outlining its so-called environmental justice work, the DOL's climate plan references a strategic investment. But such waste of resources isn't an investment at all. It is a colossal waste of taxpayer money. Madam Chair, the Department of Labor is dedicating limited resources, manpower, and money towards implementing the left's climate change agenda, while the very American citizens on whose behalf it is supposed to be advocating, the working man, lose ground every day. With inflation eating away at their buying power, individuals having to give up on work, and intergenerational government dependency being some of the fallout related to those policies. A vote for my amendment is a vote for sending a message to the Department of Labor and any federal agency engaged in pushing radical climate change initiatives. It is time for the DOL to focus on the job the American people expect it to do. And with that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by a gentlewoman from Wyoming. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to.